Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. We're really excited about this evening to see what's happening with our GALAXY Registry. Okay, so I want to go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Carol Marchart. I'm the Executive Director of Access, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you could join us. Access is an amazing organization. I'm sure you've all been to our website, genetic.org. And we're here to support people with X and Y chromosome variations, XXY, XXYY, trisomy X, triple XY, and individuals who are mosaic, and any other combination of the above. And we consider ourselves a community, so we're all here to support each other. We appreciate your support by coming to webinars, by telling people about this, and also giving donations. You can find that on our website. There's a Support Us button. There's also a Contact Us button, so if you're not already on our mailing list, make sure you do that. So I want to take more of our time talking about Access. I want to give this over to our two presenters. Susan Howell, you all know. She is a genetic counselor and professor at the University of Colorado. She is also a board member for Access, and she is just such a strong supporter for us. Kayla also joins us. Kayla has just joined the team in Colorado, and we're really happy to have her here. She's a summer student now and just told us that she's going to be staying on. So we're very excited. So they're here to give us an update on the GALAXY Registry. So without further ado, I am going to kind of disappear in the background, and I'll come back for the Q&A and let them go ahead and share their information. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be presenting today. I have the pleasure of introducing Kayla. So Kayla Molison has been a recent graduate of the University of Colorado at Boulder, where she studied biochemistry and molecular biology, and she is now pursuing a career in genetic counseling, which I'm very excited about. She worked with our team this past summer as an Extraordinary Kids Clinic summer research intern, and her focus for her summer intern project was on the GALAXY Registry. So Kayla has learned the registry intimately, and we're excited for her to share some initial information about the registry with you tonight. So I'll go ahead and let Kayla start.
All right. Well, thank you all for giving me this opportunity to be here. I'm very excited. As Susan mentioned, my name is Kayla Molison, and today I'm going to be providing you all with an update on the current progress of the GALAXY Registry, including a summary of the initial data that we have collected from our current participants. The registry has been operational for a little over a year now, so we're really excited to share how far it's come and also where we see it going in the future. All right, so just to give you some background, the GALAXY Registry is a tool that we are using to further study X and Y chromosome variations. And I'm sure these variations won't need much of an introduction for many of you. But these are a group of genetic conditions characterized by an atypical number of sex chromosomes. A few examples of these conditions are shown in the figure on the right. Now, these variations have an incidence of about 1 in every 400 live births, although the exact incidence does vary by karyotype, with trisomies like XXY, XYY, and trisomy X being a lot more common than tetrasomies and pentasomies. Now, crucially, these variations can cause a range of medical, behavioral, and neurodevelopmental concerns, which is one reason why diagnosis and treatment is so important. But interestingly, we do see that these concerns vary drastically between different people with X and Y variations. On one hand, that's due to natural differences between different variation conditions. Each condition typically has its own sort of unique blend of symptoms that can come with it that set it apart from other conditions. But even within the same variation, we still see a lot of variation in both the types of symptoms experienced and the severity of those symptoms. And that unpredictability is a big reason why research in this area is still so important. And that brings me to the GALAXY Registry itself. So historically, most studies on X and Y variations have been limited by a number of factors, including small sample size, minimal diversity, a lack of X and Y community involvement, and a cross-sectional lens, which basically means they look at something at only one point in time instead of over time. And really, the GALAXY Registry was created to directly address these limitations. So you might be asking yourself, well, what is the GALAXY Registry? Well, it is a clinical data registry. And what that means is that it is designed to collect and store patient clinical data. And in particular, it stores validated medical information and also biospecimens like blood samples from people who have these variations. And the reason this type of setup is useful is because if we can get lots of data on lots of different people with unique backgrounds, we can kind of get a better, more clear picture of what the medical picture looks like for these individuals. And we can start to notice things like trends and patterns that might enable us to learn more about these conditions and also improve treating them in some way. And so really the goal of the registry is to create a large and nationally representative cohort that we can study to hopefully improve health outcomes for people with these X and Y variations. I do want to mention that the GALAXY Registry is funded in part by Access, which is absolutely amazing. It's really helped us actually get this project off the ground. Also, there is a steering committee composed of researchers, doctors, and other X and Y community members and advocates that provide oversight on the registry. And that really allows us to include the X and Y community in ways that prior research hasn't been able to do as efficiently. I would like to briefly go over a little bit of eligibility and enrollment information. So participants are eligible for GALAXY if they have or their child has a genetically confirmed X and Y chromosome variation diagnosis. By genetically confirmed, we just mean that that variation has been verified by a genetic test, and that you are willing to provide us with a copy of that genetic test. So there are no other age, sex, gender requirements, nothing like that. You just need to have a confirmed diagnosis. I do want to mention that rather recently, the European participants are now eligible to participate in GALAXY. Previously, this was not the case, but now we have a brand new consent form that we can give to anyone living in a country governed by GDPR. So if that is you, welcome to the registry if you're interested in joining. In terms of what the enrollment process looks like, at least right now, participants can enroll either online or at Children's Hospital Colorado. In terms of what the enrollment process looks like, essentially participants just have to provide consent for their medical records to be used in research. There is no other research visit or clinical visit, nothing like that. You just have to consent to us looking at your medical records and then using them in our research. I do want to mention, though, that during that consent process, there are a number of other optional research opportunities that you can sign up for as well. You can opt to receive a few questionnaires about once a year. You can be put on a recruitment list for future studies. So if there's a future research study that you're eligible for, we can reach out to you about it and see if you're interested. And then you can also provide us with a blood sample that would get put in a biobank, and we could use that for future research studies as well. But again, I want to emphasize that all of these last three options are completely optional, and you do not need to sign up for any of them if you just want to be a basic GALAXY enrollee. All right, so what exactly happens to this data after we access it from you? Well, participant data is entered into REDCap. REDCap is a HIPAA-compliant research platform originally made by Vanderbilt University, and it's used by most major academic institutions. One thing I want to emphasize is that data in REDCap is de-identified, and what that means is that when we take your data and put it into REDCap, anything that could attach you to your personal health information, so something, for instance, like your name, is actually removed. That way, once we start working with your data and analyzing it, it cannot be reattached to you. In terms of what you provide us with, you will provide us with basic demographic information. So essentially, when you enroll in the registry, we'll have a basic information form that you will quickly fill out that contains demographic information like race, ethnicity, and gender, stuff like that. And then we will go ahead and put that into REDCap. But all other data, things on diagnostic data, things like data on medications, that is all entered by researchers using your medical records. So there's nothing else that you guys will need to enter, nothing like that. All right, so that sort of summarizes the eligibility and enrollment process. So now I can actually move into the project that I worked on during my internship, which involved analyzing the initial participants in the GALAXY Registry. So within the first year of the GALAXY Registry, over 180 participants enrolled, about half enrolled at Children's Hospital Colorado and about half enrolled online. A summary of this enrollment history over time is shown on this graph here. You can see that we started enrolling participants in June of last year, and this project went to July 10th of this year. So this is good progress. Over 180 participants within a year is pretty good. But one thing that we wanted to do before we got further into that enrollment period was do preliminary data analysis to really kind of see who was in the registry 1 year in. And the reason we wanted to do that was we did not want to get super far into the enrollment window where, suddenly we're getting close to publishing and we have 300 to 400 participants, perhaps, only to find out that our cohort was not as ideal as we wanted it to be. For instance, it might not be as nationally representative as we wanted, or there might be a variation that is underrepresented in the registry. Those were things that we wanted to know about, and we wanted to know about them early. And so that's really where this project came in. I essentially did a preliminary data analysis 1 year in to kind of understand who is in the registry right now and how are we going to need to adjust anything going forward. And so for a little bit of the methods of how this project worked, some of this I've already detailed, but essentially patients patients consented to Galaxy and then enrolled either at Children's Hospital of Colorado or online. Their data was then entered into REDCap, which is that HIPAA compliant platform that I talked about. Demographic data is reported by participants, while diagnostic data is entered by research staff using medical record reviews. And then the data pool, which is basically where you take the data in REDCap, take it out and start analyzing it with a data analyzing software, essentially, was done by myself on July 10th of this year. I only included participants that had data entered into REDCap, specifically demographic and diagnostic data, and only those who had provided us with a genetic test report at that time. And then finally, I did the data analysis. So essentially, I just summarized the data using descriptive statistics. So that's things like mean, median, proportions, range, that fun stuff. All right. And so when it comes to the actual data itself, we had a sample size of 159. The median age of enrollment was 12, but we saw a range from 0 to 73 years, which is a pretty wide range. You can see this on the graph as well, although the most common age of enrollment was between 11 to 20 years. We did have a large amount of people who were under 10 and also a large amount of people who were under 1. But we also have a healthy portion of people over the age of 20, so actual adults as well. So quite a lot of variety in terms of the age of enrollment. The majority of participants were from Colorado, which does make sense as that was our main in-person study site, but we saw representation from 39 states, so quite a lot of states. When it comes to race and ethnicity data, unfortunately, we did see that we have somewhat limited racial diversity, at least at this time. When we specifically look at the races of American Indian, Asian, and Black, we can see that less than 1% of the registry participants reported each of these races, which is under what it should be based on current US Census data. Additionally, this is further confirmed by the fact that when we look at race and ethnicity together, we can see that around 71% of our participants reported or were non-Hispanic white, which is over the approximately 59% it should be based on current US Census data. And so it does look like at this point, we have somewhat limited racial diversity, and our registry isn't quite as nationally representative as we would like it to be, which is one of the main things that we're going to try to address going forward. The other thing that we looked at was underrepresentation. So a part of having a diverse cohort of subjects is including people who are, for whatever reason, conventionally left out of medicine and research. You can be underrepresented in medicine or research for many reasons. It doesn't just have to be something like race or ethnicity. It could be something like having low socioeconomic status, being non-cisgender, or not having English as your primary language. And all of these can contribute. And we kind of wanted to take a closer look at them. So what we did is specifically in the categories of race, ethnicity, payer status, which we used as a proxy for socioeconomic status, gender, and survey language, we observed how many of our participants were a member of at least one underrepresented in medicine group. And ultimately, we saw that about 40% of our participants belonged to at least one underrepresented in medicine group. Of this 40%, about 70% are a member of a single underrepresented group, while 30% are a member of multiple underrepresented groups and hence kind of have a more complicated compounding experience when it comes to underrepresentation. In terms of where most of this underrepresentation seems to be coming from, most of it seems to be coming from payer status and then race and ethnicity. About 19.5% of our participants had an underrepresented payer status, while about 17% had an underrepresented ethnicity, and the same for race. And so this just kind of gave us a more clear picture of what the underrepresentation within the registry looks like right now. And this is something we're definitely going to keep track of as we enroll additional participants. And when it comes to diagnostic data, we ultimately saw that about 28% of our participants were diagnosed prenatally, so before birth. About 15% were diagnosed postnatally or after birth, but with the knowledge of a prenatal positive screen. And then the remaining 55% were diagnosed postnatally. Of those diagnosed postnatally, the median age of diagnosis was around 9 years old, while the median diagnostic delay, which is the amount of time between onset of symptoms and then actual diagnosis, was around 2.5 years. However, the ranges for each of these values was pretty wide, indicating that there was a lot of variability in the exact timing of diagnosis and also the length of diagnostic delay. When it comes to how people were diagnosed, the majority of our participants, around 56%, were diagnosed through routine karyotyping. The next most common method was a combination of multiple methods, but even within this category, about 90% of the participants who had multiple tests performed had a karyotype combined with something else. So there was overall a really strong preference for this type of testing. When it comes to the actual reported karyotype, so basically what variation condition do you have, we saw that the majority of the registry, around 70%, have non-mosaic XXY. This is actually, the number of participants here is quite high, 111. And for this group specifically, this is great. This actually gives us a lot of statistical power to look at this group in more depth. But unfortunately, when we start to look at the other reported karyotypes, we can see that there does appear to be a deficit of them. Compared to this 111 number, these numbers are way, way lower in comparison. And unfortunately, that is a little bit unfortunate because it means at this current moment, we don't really have enough non-XXY participants for us to be able to take a more in-depth look at all of this data. And so going forward, if we want to be able to make statistically significant findings and have meaningful conclusions from all of these groups, we definitely need more non-XXY participants. And that's one of our main goals for the registry going forward. All right, and then the last piece of data I have to present on is indications for genetic testing. So among people who were either screened or diagnosed prenatally, so before birth, the most common reason for testing was advanced maternal age. About 50% of our participants cited that as a reason for testing. The next most common was routine/elective reasons. This includes things like wanting to know the sex of your baby, which about a quarter of our participants cited as a reason for prenatal testing. In terms of our postnatal participants, so our postnatally diagnosed participants, we saw that the most common reason for postnatal testing was developmental delay before age 3, learning or behavioral concerns, and then other, which contained a wide variety of various physical anomalies, medical emergencies, and other conditions. However, pulling back, I do want to emphasize that when we look at this entire table, you can see that although all these symptoms were reported by at least one person, most of them were not reported by more than 10, indicating that there wasn't really a predominant set of symptoms that came before diagnosis and prompted testing. It was largely quite variable. And this does align with what we know about the inherent variability of these variation conditions. All right, so in summary, from our initial data, we ultimately saw that our participants have diversity in age and timing of diagnosis, but less diversity in race and then the actual conditions themselves, with most participants having non-mosaic XXY. About 40% of our participants are underrepresented in medicine in some way, and we are interested in seeing how that changes as we get additional participants. The top indications for prenatal testing were advanced maternal age and then elective routine reasons, which does align with prior research. And the top reasons for postnatal testing were quite variable, which does align with the irregular clinical presentation of X and Y variations. In terms of future directions, one of our main goals is, of course, to enroll additional participants in GALAXY, especially those with diversity in race and then karyotype. This will be assisted if we can increase the number of clinic sites participating in GALAXY, as right now, Children's Hospital Colorado is the only in-person site. Once we get more data on people with other more diverse karyotypes, we'd like to analyze how demographic and diagnostic history varies between different X and Y variation conditions. And we'd also like to analyze perinatal history of our participants, although this data is still being entered into REDCap as we speak. And then, of course, we'd eventually like to publish on topics of high interest to the X and Y community using all the data that we have collected so far. All right. So finally, I'd just like to go over how you can get involved. There's many things that you can do to help us out as we continue on with this project. For one, if you are eligible and you have not yet enrolled, please consider enrolling. Registries are really all about power in numbers. The more people we have, the more data that we have, the more meaningful conclusions we can start to make. So please consider enrolling if you haven't already. Additionally, if you have already enrolled or perhaps you're ineligible, but you know someone who could enroll, please tell them about GALAXY. We'd be more than happy to sit down with them and let them know what this experience would entail. And then also, if you'd like to support GALAXY financially, you can make a GALAXY specific financial donation, which we would greatly appreciate. If you want to know more about GALAXY, I've attached a QR code actually to a video going over the GALAXY in a little bit more depth than I did here. Included in this QR code is actually a video in which our main study coordinator, Alexa, takes you through the enrollment process and filling out the consent form. So if you want to do it side by side with her, this is a great way to do that. Additionally, you can find much more information about GALAXY at galaxyregistry.org. And you can also reach out to us via this number or our email, galaxy@ucdenver.edu, and we'd be very, very excited to talk to you. With that being said, I'd like to say thank you. For one, thank you to all of the participants that we have enrolled in GALAXY so far. Obviously, this would not be possible without you, so thank you so much if you have enrolled. And then also thank you to everyone who has funded this, Access especially, but also Living with XXY and then the XXYY project. We would not have been able to get this project off the ground without you guys. With that being said, I'll open it up for questions. If for whatever reason you need to leave, but you want to ask me a question on this project, you can email me at kayla.mollison@ucdenver.edu, and you can also email Susan for other questions as well. Thank you.